Welcome back, focused learners. Today on The Explainer, we're giving you a complete overview of the whole thing. We are tracing the absolutely wild, astonishing arc of a company that literally set out to destroy an industry, only to end up becoming its savior. It's a story packed with incredible ironies, brilliant design, and, well, devastating unintended consequences. This whole saga perfectly captures that classic Silicon Valley move fast and break things vibe. But when applied to a physical product, breaking things had very permanent, very human costs. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the sheer scale here is just mind-blowing. Picture this. It's 2018, and Juul is a $38 billion company. $38 billion. They actually reached that valuation faster than Facebook did. The founders? Overnight billionaires. And they operated with this very earnest TED Talk-style mission statement. They were going to improve the lives of the world's 1 billion adult smokers by giving them a safer, cleaner, just an all-around better alternative to combustible cigarettes. They genuinely believed they were the good guys.
But just 5 years later, wait, what? $450 million? That is a staggering 95% collapse from its peak. I mean, the founders had completely resigned in disgrace. The company itself was buried under nearly $3 billion in legal settlements. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth do you go from this incredibly noble mission and a $38 billion peak to an absolute total freefall in just half a decade?
Well, to really understand that, we got to rewind a bit to 2004. We're at Stanford University's design studios with two students, Adam Bowen and James Monsees. Now, these guys were spending a lot of time taking smoke breaks outside their studios. And because they were completely obsessed with product design, they kept looking at the cigarettes in their hands and asking a pretty fundamental question. Could this actually be improved? They realized smokers weren't failing to quit just because of the nicotine, but because of the ritual. The physical act of stepping outside, the social aspect, that familiar hand-to-mouth gesture. They figured if they could just keep that ritual, but strip away the most dangerous elements, they'd have something absolutely massive on their hands.
As they dug deeper into their research, Adam and James stumbled onto an absolute goldmine. And it was hidden away right there in decades of internal tobacco industry documents. It turns out, since the early 1950s, Big Tobacco had actually known that heating tobacco into a vapor, instead of burning it, produced a significantly less toxic chemical mix. The science was literally already there, but Big Tobacco deliberately buried it. Why? Well, releasing a safer cigarette meant publicly admitting that their current, massively profitable ones were completely unsafe and deadly. So Adam and James saw an incredible opportunity to take this buried, forgotten concept and bring it to 1 billion smokers.
Their very first attempt at this was a startup they called Plume. Armed with about $400,000 in seed funding, they built a prototype. And, spoiler alert, it was a complete disaster. We're talking about prototypes literally exploding right there inside their office. And it gets worse. To even use it, you had to manually fill a cartridge with highly flammable butane lighter fluid. By the time it finally shipped in 2009, the nicotine delivery was so incredibly weak and inconsistent that users were literally taping 2 devices together just to get a satisfying hit. It was clunky, dangerous, and smokers absolutely rejected it.
It became pretty obvious they had to completely start over from scratch. Plume was just a novelty, not an actual replacement for a deeply ingrained habit. So they pivoted to what would eventually become the Juul. James took point on the design, and he aimed for something that Apple might create. Out went that clunky, butane-powered mess. In its place came a brutally simple, minimalist device with just 2 pieces, a super sleek body and a pod that just intuitively snapped together. It ended up looking way more like a modern USB drive than anything resembling a traditional cigarette.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the engineering breakthrough that made Juul actually work. It came down to pure chemistry. See, traditional, pure nicotine tastes incredibly bitter and harsh. If you put enough of it into an e-liquid to actually satisfy a pack-a-day smoker, the throat hit was just unbearable. But Adam went back to those historical tobacco documents and discovered something called nicotine salts. This specific chemical form naturally dampened all that harsh throat irritation. It was a total game changer. It allowed them to deliver dramatically higher concentrations of nicotine super smoothly. Plus, it meant they could flavor it literally however they wanted. Think mango, mint, or creme brulee.
The business implications of combining this super sleek design with those nicotine salts were just absolutely staggering. I mean, the cigarette was already considered one of the most perfectly engineered commercial products ever devised, but Juul completely lapped it. Think about it. You could use it indoors without leaving any lingering smell. It was incredibly easy to pocket and completely conceal. The sweet flavors made the whole experience actively pleasant instead of gross. And the nicotine hit? It was actually more powerful and efficient than a traditional cigarette. They essentially reinvented the world's most addictive commercial product and somehow made it vastly more convenient. So they finally had the perfect product. Now they just needed to sell the thing. In 2015, they brought in a marketing director named Richard Mumby. He was a specialist in lifestyle advertising, and this hire was a massive turning point. At the time, the HThe hadn't established any real regulatory framework for e-cigarettes yet. It was the absolute Wild West. Juul was entirely free to market their product in ways that traditional tobacco companies had been legally banned from doing for literal decades. And that open runway led directly to the infamous vaporized campaign. The strategy they went with remains highly controversial. To make the product look super aspirational, they put it directly into the hands of young, extremely attractive lifestyle influencers. They practically dominated Instagram. Reports even showed their ads popping up on websites like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. And on top of that, you could buy it online with basically zero age verification. It was this near-perfect, super aggressive echo of mid-20th century cigarette advertising, right down to targeting the youth. Now, inside the company, some executives were genuinely uncomfortable with this. But they were burning through cash, and this aggressive playbook, it drove absolutely massive growth. Fast forward to 2016, and the HThe finally starts making moves to regulate e-cigarettes. Juul ran into a major problem. Their pods were leaking. Fixing that leak meant they'd have to modify the physical product, which legally would trigger a very lengthy HThe review. So, Juul quietly re-engineered the pods in secret to completely evade that review process. Right around the same time, that youth-focused vaporized campaign really caught fire. By 2017, the product was going massively, organically viral. A-list celebrities were using it everywhere. Sales exploded, pushing Juul to a $10 billion valuation. $10 billion! They hit that milestone 4 times faster than Facebook ever did. So the crucial point is the fundamental, really fatal design flaw of the Juul itself. Unlike a traditional cigarette, which literally burns down to the filter and provides this natural built-in stopping point, the Juul never told you when to stop. A single tiny pod contained the nicotine equivalent of an entire pack of 20 cigarettes. You had young kids buying these discreet, flash drive-looking devices and vaping massive, unprecedented amounts of nicotine right under their desks during math class, completely undetected. And the data that followed this trend was absolutely terrifying. Before Juul came along, e-cigarettes were largely unappealing to teens, and youth smoking rates had actually been declining for years. But by 2018, high school vaping had spiked by a staggering 80%, and middle school vaping jumped by 60%. Think about that. Juul single-handedly reversed years of positive public health trends. Suddenly, more than 3 million high schoolers were regular users. We were looking at a full-blown youth nicotine epidemic. Naturally, the political backlash was swift and it was severe. The HThe launched an incredibly aggressive investigation. They demanded thousands of internal documents, which unfortunately revealed Juul's youth-targeting tactics and their completely unsubstantiated health claims. This entire pressure cooker culminated in James Monsi's being called to testify before Congress. It was a devastating, highly public takedown. At one point, a U.S. senator looked him dead in the eye and publicly called him nothing but a marketer of a poison. Faced with this intense, existential media and regulatory pressure, Juul made a move that basically betrayed their entire founding mission. HThe, the maker of Marlboro, and the absolute undeniable embodiment of big tobacco, had been nervously watching Juul destroy their traditional cigarette sales, so HThe swooped in and bought a 35% stake in Juul for $12.8 billion. Now the founders, they became multi-billionaires overnight, but for the passionate employees who joined the company specifically to destroy big tobacco, the dream was dead. The very enemy they set out to defeat now owned a massive piece of their company.
Let's move to Juul and see how this builds into their spectacular collapse. In July of 2019, teenagers suddenly started showing up in emergency rooms with mysterious, severe lung damage. Tragically, 68 people died. Absolute panic erupted, and because Juul was the biggest name in the space, they immediately became the face of the crisis, which quickly led to the founders' forced resignations. But here is the really tragic irony. Those hospitalizations were later definitively proven to be caused by vitamin E acetate found in black market cannabis vapes, not Juul. But by then, the PR damage was completely irreversible. By 2022, the HThe ordered their devices off the market, dragging the company into years of endless appeals and forcing them to pay out over $3 billion in legal settlements.
Now, looking at this impartially, we really have to acknowledge the complex nuance of Juul's legacy. On one side, their core defense is actually scientifically valid. Vaping does contain dramatically fewer carcinogens than burning raw tobacco. And for the adult pack-a-day smokers who successfully switched, Juul very likely improved their long-term health outcomes. It wasn't a fake or fraudulent product. But on the exact opposite side of the ledger is an undeniable, irreversible cost. They addicted millions of non-smoking teenagers to highly concentrated nicotine through incredibly aggressive, appealing marketing and a super concealed design. It's a stark, real-world reminder of exactly what happens when disruptive tech outpaces regulation.
Which leaves us with this final, really profound question. Did Juul just end up doing Big Tobacco's dirty work for them? It's honestly the ultimate dark irony of Silicon Valley's ethos. Adam and James set out with genuine intentions to destroy Big Tobacco and save a billion lives. But instead, they accidentally solved Big Tobacco's biggest existential problem, which was an aging, dying customer base. They handed them a highly addictive, ultra-efficient delivery mechanism and an entirely new, freshly addicted generation of users. It really makes you wonder, when we move fast and break things in the realm of public health, who actually ends up picking up the pieces? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.